Welcome to another video on edible and medicinal plants here in Pennsylvania, as well as, large parts of the eastern US as well. And I'm doing a couple of videos today on some of these plants. I did find two of the ones I'm looking for, wild geraniums and golden seal. Now we're looking for wild ginger. And I have found some today. Of course, I was here a couple days ago and I showed you what wild ginger looked like, some of its interesting little habits that it has. And I have seen some on the trail, but I'm looking for a larger patch of it. So we shall see. Alright, let's keep looking. Yeah, there's some growing here amongst the rocks. But I'd prefer to find some that were not right on the trail. There's a number of people out here today. I don't want to kind of be in people's way. So I'm looking for a larger clump that's just off trail for us. We should be coming up on a pretty large patch of it soon, if I remember correctly. That's kind of what I'm looking for from when I was here last time. I think this spot right here will work just fine. We still are on a trail, but this is a lesser traveled trail. This is where I ate lunch last time I was here. I kind of sat right there and ate lunch. And there is quite a bit of wild ginger right down here. There's a lot of other edible plants here too, medicinal things. I think I talked about hepatica before in a video. I didn't make a video of just hepatica yet, but it's over here. There's some bloodroot up here too. I did do a video on bloodroot, but we're going to talk about wild ginger today. So we do have some nice wild ginger growing right down here at my feet. And I know some of this I talked about in a recent video, but I want to show the flowers to you again. They're pretty unique. And some other things about this wild ginger. So let me turn you around and get a closer look at them down here. So here is the plant. There's a whole patch of it growing right here. And down here, once again, are the flowers. They're way down here on the bottom. Sometimes you have to scratch away the leaves a little bit. I think my hand might be causing a shadow a bit there, but you can see them there. Kind of a brownish color. Sometimes they're kind of purplish, but they bloom, instead of blooming up on top of the plant, they bloom down below there. And there's a reason for that. They don't rely on bees for pollination. They rely on more ground insects like beetles and especially ants. And the leaves have a kidney shaped them, which causes them to be used for certain medicinal purposes. I think I mentioned that in a previous video. There's something called the doctrine of signatures from back in medieval times. Alright, so I've got you set up on the tripod now. I'll talk to you a bit. Interesting thing about the flowers, before we get into some of the edible and medicinal stuff, is that the seeds have these little fleshy bits attached to them, which the ants like, and so the ants are what help spread wild ginger. The ants like those little fleshy bits. They don't care about the seeds. They like those little fleshy bits. So they'll take the seeds back to their colony, which is usually underground, and they'll eat the fleshy bits, and then sometimes just discard the seed outside the back door of the colony, or sometimes just leave it in the ground there in the colony, and that's the main way that wild ginger spreads around the forest, due to the ants. So it's kind of a unique thing. And apparently the flowers smell like dead meat or carrion, and that's what attracts the insects. I'm going to try that in a moment for you. Normally I don't encourage picking wild plants or wild flowers, but wild ginger is fairly common. Actually, it's extremely common. It grows everywhere, so I will not worry about that. I'll pick some up for you. I don't want to smell the leaves too if they smell any gingery smell to them. And also I mentioned that doctrine of signatures. Actually, last time I sat at this rock, I think I mentioned I had lunch here last time. Down there is growing the hepatica, and I did a little blurb about hepatica in that video, how it was used for the doctrine of signatures as well, because the leaves look like, a liver has 3 lobes, and the hepatica leaf has 3 lobes, so people thought it was used for the liver. The doctrine of signatures thought that the shape of a plant, the shape of its leaves or its flowers, determined what part of the body it was used for. And because the leaves, let me pick a leaf here. Because the leaves of the wild ginger kind of that kidney shape, they thought it was good for kidneys, or for kidney disease and urinary problems. So while I'm here too, I did pick one of the flowers. I don't smell any like bad smell to it though. It doesn't smell like dead stuff to me. It doesn't necessarily have a good smell, but it doesn't smell bad. And the leaves don't really smell. Actually, there's a bit of a spicy smell to the leaves though. I'll take that. I'll say that. The roots probably smell a lot more gingery, but I'm not gonna dig up the roots. Picking a leaf or a flower isn't gonna destroy the plant, but I don't want to dig up any of the roots. So anyway, the flowers didn't smell like rotting meat to me. Anyway, let's get into some of the edible and medicinal properties and the scientific name next. So here is the scientific name, Asarum canadense. Of course, once again, canadense just means of Canada. That's found in Canada. Asarum, I had a little difficulty finding anything what that meant, and you Google and Wikipedia had trouble too. One guess is that Asarum refers to a plant back over in Europe called spikenard, or back over at Europe, Asia area, and that wild ginger kind of resembled that plant, because remember when the colonists came over, they were familiar with what we call old world plants from across the pond, and when they came over here, certain plants reminded them of stuff from over there. So scientific name could mean plant found in Canada that looks like spikenard. That's kind of what name means. Anyway, and wild ginger also goes by other names. Sometimes it's called ginger root or Indian ginger, usually things associated with ginger. But the most ironic thing about wild ginger is that it's not actually ginger. It's not even in the ginger family. But when Europeans first came over, they were familiar with the ginger plant from back, like I said, across the pond. So when they came across this plant, I guess the smell and the taste resembled ginger, so they called it wild ginger, but it is not actually ginger. It's not even in the ginger family. So just keep that in mind. Edibility, people do eat the roots. They're said to be quite tasty and flavorful. They make a candy from the roots as well. Some people make tea out of it. However, just like in some of the other plants we talk about, it can be used for those things. It actually has a long list of medicinal purposes too, which I'll get to in a bit. But it can also be toxic as well, if you're not careful. I read about one guy who made some wild ginger tea for his family, and he sent himself and his whole family to the hospital because he didn't really prepare it correctly, or I forget how that went. He didn't do something right, and he caused a lot of harm to his family. So as I'll say in all my videos, and this one as well, as a disclaimer, if you are gonna partake of wild edibles, or medicinal properties of wild plants, do your own research. Don't just do things based off what I say in this video, and make sure you do plenty of research, because although some plants can be beneficial, they can also be harmful if they're misused as well. So keep that in mind. And the main toxic ingredient in wild ginger is this, some type of acid. If you could pronounce that, go ahead. I'm not even gonna try. It got to the point where, like on Wikipedia and Google, they're just calling it AA for abbreviation instead of writing that out all the time. But that is the toxic ingredient in wild ginger that can be potentially harmful or even deadly if you misuse wild ginger. Another interesting little tale about it is sometimes it's called a wart chase. I wrote in my notes, wart chase, because apparently witches would use it to get rid of the warts on their face so people wouldn't think they were witches. That's kind of interesting. So I guess if you saw that there was a woman out in the woods collecting wild ginger, there's a potential that she was a witch. Because unfortunately too, back in the day, a lot of women were accused of being witches for using medicinal plants. And it's a shame, because a lot of medicinal plants were actually beneficial, but because it seemed magical that a plant could heal someone, these women were thought to be witches as well, and then a lot of them were burned and killed. And it's kind of a shame, because they were actually helping people. So yeah, I'd like to think that we've come a bit of a way since then, but Doesn't always seem that way. So wild ginger is another one of those plants that kind of has a long list of potential medicinal qualities. Once again, my notes here, so I'll read some of these for you. Apparently for earaches, they've used it for an irregular heartbeat, for fevers. I think I read they would use it for snake bites sometimes, things like that. And also as an insect repellent, which I thought was kind of interesting, or even as an insecticide to kill the insects. And then there's another section where another site that I read that said they would make a deodorant out of it. So I'm not sure how that would work. I don't know. So I was trying to think about how you make a deodorant out of wild ginger, but apparently it was something they used it for. It's interesting. One other thing that it was used for, unfortunately, was some sites just said it was used as a contraceptive, but it was a type of contraceptive. It's kind of misleading because it was a type of contraceptive they would use after you conceived. It was a way of removing an unwanted pregnancy at times. It would cause you to menstruate or have, I think you know where I'm going with that. There's a number of plants that do that. There's a scientific name for that, but anyway, kind of an unfortunate use of it at times in the past. Because I think I already mentioned this before, that it was used to make a candy, but it's similar to bloodroot. I've mentioned bloodroot before. I did a video on bloodroot, but they made candy out of bloodroot, but if you ate too much of the candy, it would be poisonous, and this wild ginger is kind of the same. Like, if you partake too much of wild ginger, it can be toxic, but they still make a candy out of it, which is one of the kind of weird. But anyway, it is an interesting plant. Like I said, I love the flowers, how they're like hidden from you. You have to go find them. Like, if you didn't know the flowers were there, you would never find them because you actually have to go looking for them. All right, I think that'll be it for this video. But once again, be careful if you do use wild edibles and medicinals. Don't send yourself or anybody else to the hospital. All right, I'll see you around.